Welcome all the participants who have been joining from across the world. It's a pleasure to have you in the last session of the day. And as many of you are aware that over the last 3 weeks or so, we have been organizing the Humanitarian Networks and Partnership Weeks since 19th of April. And this year, it's a bit special on the sense that for the first time, we're talking about security risk management. And this year theme was integrating security risk management across humanitarian action. In the last session for the day, we shall be talking about a person-centered approach to security risk management in humanitarian response. So when we talk about security risk management is traditionally being regarded as a very monotonous and very overtly procedural way of approaching or managing security. However, in this contemporary world, as we talk about much more security incident, as we talk about complex conflict situations, security risk management needed to be much more dynamic and much more responsive so that it can take care of different challenges and needs of our individual staff members who are part of the overall diverse workforce. So let us give me the opportunity to introduce our distinguished facilitators. But before that, my name is Somnath Theory. I'm the host. I'm UNHCR Field Security Advisor for Tanzania operation. Over to you, Catherine.
Thank you very much, Somnath. My name is Catherine Plumridge. I'm with the United Nations Department for Safety and Security, and I'm a security training officer. Over to you, Julie.
Yes, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. So my name is Julie Spooner, and I am a Senior Field Security Advisor with UNHCR. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Pegah Rajabi, and I work with the Security and Crisis Management Support Unit at the International Committee of the Red Cross based in Geneva. Thanks for joining.
Hello, my name is Philip Wordsluff. I work for CBM Christian Blind Mission as the Global Health and Safety Advisor.
Hi everyone, this is Simona Mortolini. Welcome. I'm the Global Gender and Diversity Safety and Security Manager at Save the Children.
Thank you all. Now let us move to the next slide. We shall be talking about the agenda. So this is in this sequence, we shall proceed in this session. We shall start with, we have already started with welcoming and introduction. Thereafter, we will move to opening exercise, presentation on a person-centered approach, group discussion and case studies, and you shall have opportunity to discuss on the subject in the breakout rooms. Thereafter, plenary feedback, key messages, how we can implement this person-centered approach in our organizations, and finally, way forward and closing. Now, moving to the objectives of this particular session, we have two objectives: to demonstrate that all personnel have a personal risk profile, which in particular context interacts to expose that person to increased risk. The second objective is to allow discussion on the consideration of personal profiles in security risk management processes and the alignment between security risk management and programmatic needs. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we all are enablers. We should enable programs irrespective of, and managing the risks irrespective of the situation where we are in. So now moving to some housekeeping rules and informations. This event will last for 90 minutes and will be recorded. Please introduce yourself in the chat to everyone. This will be an interactive event. We are looking forward to your active participations. This includes the breakout rooms. Please stay muted unless we ask you to unmute. Turn your camera on more so when you discuss in the breakout rooms. For any technical reasons or issues, please reach out on the chat. We have GISF production who will take care of those issues. For any hearing impaired participants, we have the provisions of closed captions. You can see here, which is marked by this red square. You can take use of that to know the wordings of what is going on during the session. Now, may I request Catherine to take us forward from here? Over to you, Catherine.
Thank you, Somnath, very much. Colleagues, does one size fit all in security risk management, or do we need a different approach? So in talking about a person-centered approach, the people at the center, our personnel, are not passive members of the security equation. They have concerns and abilities. So let's take, for example, a team in Eastern Ukraine and look at the security concerns that they have. So all of the testimonies you're about to hear are real, but the photos and the voices are not the original personnel. So what concerns might they have? Let's start with Soipei. What sort of threats might she be concerned about?
I can't go out to shop because the shopkeepers assume I am either a domestic worker or a sex worker and sexually harass me. A man slapped my face, blaming me for the COVID virus.
Let's hear about Nathan.
I feel ashamed hiding my kippah under a baseball cap, but I got beaten up and robbed last year in an anti-Semitic attack.
And Namasi?
Speak badly to me. I hear them using racial slurs. I saw an email from my manager addressed to someone else expressing concern over my involvement in a briefing to the government due to my race. He didn't defend me. I was excluded. I hear racist comments all the time, but at work, it destroys my confidence and I don't feel safe.
And what about Ranjit?
I really need to go on home leave. But last time I went back to the US, I got beaten in the street for being a Muslim. I'm sick.
Colleagues, may I invite you to comment in the chat and to say what you think our next person, Ariana, if you could say what you think her concerns might be, what sort of threat might she be exposed to? So Julie's going to read that out for us very kindly. So don't feel shy. Just write that down in the chat for us, if you would, please.
Nothing yet. Nothing yet.
Oh, don't be shy. You're among friends here. Don't be shy.
Okay, sexual exploitation, abuse or harassment at the workplace. Thank you. Sean says gender security issues with a question mark. Maylin says she maybe got some bad remarks or was being catcalled. Any other risks? What else might she be thinking about?
Okay, well, that's a really good start. And let's think a little bit more about some of those hidden vulnerabilities. So let's hear from Ariana herself.
I avoid meetings with the Ministry of Agriculture because staff there stare at my breasts. They ask me out, comment on my looks and call me at night. My regional manager groped my legs in a meeting and suggested that if I didn't come to his hotel room for him to make me straight, my contract would not be extended.
And what next about Robert?
Even in high-class hotels, I am solicited by sex workers. People see a senior white man and assume that I want a sex worker. It exposes me to organized crime.
And next we're hearing from Juliana.
Even though I speak the language here and have a master in science and development, I'm not ever invited on field visits, even though my colleagues are happy to help me with PPE, the vehicle doors, or going to the bathroom. But what worries me the most is that I have no idea how I will be able to evacuate the building in case of fire.
Let's hear also from Alexander.
Tattoos are my way of expressing myself, but people make weird assumptions. In some conservative contexts, people point at my tattoos. I have been spat at in the street. I get called homophobic slurs, and a group of men even tried to run me off the road, but I escaped.
Inda, let's hear from her.
I get obscene phone calls, text messages, and photos, sexual harassment from drivers, accidental touch, colleagues leaning over me at my desk, making sexually suggestive comments. With a short-term contract, I can't say anything. I need this job.
And last but not least, let's hear from Diego.
I'm not someone who complains a lot, you know, but every time I go through a military checkpoint, and I mean every single time, I get taken out of my car. Soldiers, they pull me out and square up to me, they surround me, they push me around, they point at my arms, making fun of how big they are. Last month, I even got slapped in the face, and this guy, he hit me on my ribs with his rifle. It was horrible.
So, colleagues, our team is a diverse group, which is great for programming. And all of them have intersecting vulnerabilities, and all of them are targets of real threats. So one size of security risk management really doesn't and can't fit all. So let's continue and find out some more about the alternatives to a blank profile approach. Over to you, Philip.
Thank you, Catherine. Now we would like to discuss why humanitarian workers do not experience or perceive risk equally, even within the same context or the same places. In the next 10 to 15 minutes, Peg and myself will give you further insight on what the person-centered approach to security risk management is all about. Humanitarian workers are not a homogeneous group, in particular when it comes to the risks they face. Over to you, Peg.
Philip. Okay, but so on the next slide, please. Due to the humanitarian principles by which we work, and especially the sector's commitment to equality, many organizations tend to treat all their staff in the same way. Of course, equality is extremely important in the workplace, but when it comes to security risk management, we have to acknowledge that different staff face different risks, and not doing so can have very serious security consequences. So, how do we do this? Instead of having a one-size-fits-all approach to security, in which we give everyone the same thing, as shown on the top image, we need to start giving everyone what they need, as shown in the bottom image. And in order to do this, we have to start by assessing the diverse range of profile-specific risks we and our colleagues may face. And while we can't eliminate risks entirely, we can often put measures in place to minimize or mitigate those risks. Now, this is not a new concept. Most of us already do this to some extent in our organizations. For example, we may consider a staff member's nationality when matching them with a mission. But for security risk management to be effective, we have to consider other elements of a staff member's profile, not just their nationality. And we have to do it systematically. And this is what we call a person-centered approach to security risk management, as you'll see on the next slide.
So what do we mean by this? The person-centered approach considers the diverse personal profiles of staff. It identifies the differentiated context-specific risks and mitigation measures. Of course, if any additional measures are put in place based on personal profiles, they must be done transparently, systematically, proportionally, and on the basis of a risk assessment. This should be done predominantly at the field level with adequate consultation with field teams and/or those affected. These measures need to be put in place to ensure that the resultant level of risk is acceptable for everyone. To put it very simple, the diverse population we work with require diverse staff, and diverse staff need to be kept safe.
Great. And Of course, while a humanitarian worker's personal profile is an important factor in determining both the level and type of risks they may face, it's only one component. Personal security is impacted by the interplay between who they are, where they work, live, and travel, and their role in organization. Personal profiles can also play a role in how well an individual, their team, or the organization is accepted by local stakeholders. And this can subsequently have programmatic implications, particularly when it comes to gaining access to affected populations.
Indeed, we all have a personal profile. Sometimes personal profile is referred to as diverse profile, and we choose to use personal profile as opposed to diverse profiles in order to emphasize that we all have a profile. Many organizations already consider specific characteristics of persons when they are being deployed. To give you an example, the health condition of a person can be a reason for not deploying the staff member to a country where the person would not have the necessary access to healthcare services. Sometimes your personal profile can also be a positive factor. For example, if you speak the local language in the country of your deployment. And there are other characteristics that may not be so obvious or even visible. Humanitarian workers' personal profiles are the intersection between a wide range of visible and invisible personal identity characteristics, such as their age, race, ethnicity, nationality, religion, gender, sex, sexuality, mental health, physical ability or disability, marital partnership status, physical appearance, and previous professional experience. We have to consider the intersectionality of the individual, taking into account visible and invisible characteristics. Intersectionality refers to how our individual characteristics, such as gender, race, disability, age, etc., interact in ways that can intensify inclusion or exclusion we experience, as well as vulnerabilities, challenges, and exposure to threats and risks. So on the following slide, threats may arise not just because someone has a certain profile, but also because they are perceived to have that profile. And as you can see on this slide, the same image can be viewed in different ways based on your own experience and own context. Therefore, managing security risks implies that we all challenge our assumptions and unconscious bias towards our identity and that of our colleagues. So, what is unconscious bias and how is it related to security? First, unconscious biases are hidden beliefs that often have a significant impact on our perception of and response to people, places, and situations. We all have them. Even well-intentioned people with a diverse range of experiences can be influenced by an unconscious bias. For example, without even being aware that we do it, we've all made assumptions about our colleagues, especially when it comes to the less visible parts of their identity, such as sexual orientation, mental health, or physical ability in some cases. So how does this impact security? A common safety and security recommendation is to trust your instinct. But is this really the right approach? Some instinctive reactions are instrumental to our survival. They help us assess the level of threats and act consequently, keeping us safe. For example, we need to automatically know that a line is dangerous. We cannot analyze all lines we come across before we decide to run away. Our fight or flight response is an example of unconscious bias. It is based on what feels safe to us in a certain situation. Our experiences, our preferences, our education, our upbringing all contribute to the model of the world we have, and it makes us who we are. That is not necessarily a bad thing, but it can become a problem if we start treating groups of people as less favorable, or we make bad decisions based on our biases.
Thank you. So how can we balance our bias so that it doesn't influence how we assess risks? The first step is to recognize that we all have our own biases. Nobody is immune. We can then balance our bias by ensuring that we get different perspectives through open discussions and information exchange. One way to do this is to make sure to include a diverse range of staff when conducting security risk assessments, for example. It's also important for us to know others' biases. Understanding how others see us, especially when we're traveling and working in different contexts, is an important part of security risk management. The more you're aware of yours and others' unconscious biases, the better you interact with colleagues, stakeholders, and the populations you strive to serve. So this is something that we can do at the individual level, but as organizations, we also have a responsibility. So on the next slide, we can see that organizations have a duty of care to take all reasonable measures to protect their staff from foreseeable risks. One component of duty of care is ensuring that staff have made an informed decision to work with a full understanding of the risks that they may face. Of course, security and duty of care obligations need to be balanced with respecting employees' rights to privacy, equality, and non-discrimination. Therefore, organizations may not always have full awareness of the profiles of their staff. So one way to balance the duty of care with non-discrimination is to share information about the risks faced by all profiles with all staff. For example, security briefings can systematically include information about context-specific risks for members of the LGBTI+ community. This allows staff to access this information without having to reveal their sexual orientation or gender identity to their employer. We'll share some resources with you towards the end of the presentation that can support your organizations in assessing and sharing information on profile-specific risks.
Thank you, Pega. So the person-centered approach acknowledges that no one is safe until everyone is safe. In other words, the security of a group depends on the security of each individual. To give you an example, the inappropriate behavior of one staff member can have an impact on acceptance and program delivery, as pointed out by Pega in the previous slide that shows the interplay between the personal profile, the context, and their role in the organization. In summary, this means that programs are not safe until we are all safe. The failure to understand how personal profile characteristics impact personal security can have implications for the security of both the team as a whole and for the individual humanitarian worker, as well as causing serious security, legal, and reputational issues for employing organizations. At the end of the day, security is everyone's responsibility. Back to you, Pega.
Great. And finally, we just want to emphasize that a person-centered approach to security risk management it's not a box-ticking exercise. It's intended not only to keep our staff safer, but to make our programs more effective. The more diversity we have within our organizations, the better we can address the diverse needs of the populations that we work with. For example, having a wheelchair user in our team not only helps us to factor limited mobility into our organization's evacuation plans, but also to consider how limited mobility can impact the populations that we're working with. It may mean that we adapt our programs to consider how an upcoming monsoon season, for example, can affect populations with limited mobility in a refugee camp. Or we may add ramps to our reception center to make them more accessible. In short, a person-centered approach to security risk management is an enabler, not a restrictor of programs. So on that note, I'll wrap up this brief introduction of our approach of what it is and why it's important, and I'll hand it back over to Somnath, who will lead us to the next section.
Thank you, Pega. Thank you, other facilitators. Now, participants, now it is your turn to discuss this person-centered approach, what you understand about it and its different facets through the case studies. I shall hand over to Julie. Julie, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, colleagues. Okay, so yes, as Somnath said, it's now your turn. So we're going to put you into breakout rooms to cover this exercise. Your group will have a country name, and you will be given a case study which has a contextual scenario and 3 profiles attached to that. Now, if you do not wish to join the breakout room, we really hope that you do. I think you will benefit from the discussion that you have. But if you do not wish to join the breakout room, please do as a minimum, please stay in the plenary because we have some other information to share with you afterwards. So we will be using Jamboard, which is an interactive whiteboard. The purpose of this really is for you to gather your thoughts and post your thoughts and comments in the group, and could also be used, for example, for the rapporteur when reporting back. So the detail of that in the case study, 20 minutes, you will have 20 minutes in your breakout rooms. We ask you please to read the scenario and those 3 accompanying profiles. Have a good discussion between you. Please identify 3 key points. 1, we'd like you to identify 1 security risk faced by each of those profiles. Please be specific. So an example might be staff member harassed at checkpoint, or even better, staff member harassed at checkpoint by armed groups, something like that. So 1 security risk faced by each profile, and then 1 mitigation measure associated with that identified risk. And then 1 reason why having that person in the team is so important to the program. So those 3 points. Please appoint somebody to feedback, a rapporteur, to feedback those points to plenary. You will have less than 5 minutes per group to report back on all your points. You will, in fact, only feedback on 2 profiles. So 3 profiles in the group, but you will only feedback on 2. And those 2 profiles to focus on will be given to you by an observer from the facilitation team who will be in that breakout room with you. So they are there as observers, but they can also guide you or answer any questions that you have. So are there any messages, sorry, any questions around that exercise? First of all, you can know any. Okay, so as I say, there will be an observer with you, so you can also ask those questions to them. I'm going to pass back to Somnath just to go through some definitions before we get started. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Before we move to the breakout rooms, let us recall some of the basic definitions related with security risk management. Threat, something that can harm you, usually associated with any intentional action. Vulnerability, the extent to which personnel are exposed to a threat. And again, we talk about risk management, even though at the end of the day, it's about specific threats, but we talk about risk. So what is risk? Risk is the combination of the likelihood of that threat happening and the impact, if at all that threat happened. And then comes mitigation measures. So mitigation measures, an action which reduces the likelihood, that is preventive measures, or the impact, the mitigative measures, or a measure can act on both ways. It can reduce the likelihood as well as that of the impact. Now I shall hand over to GISF team to let us move to the breakout rooms.
Disabilities. So passing over to Simona. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Julie, and hi again, everyone. So I'm now going to read the first profile of the first staff member in visit to South Sudan. So you are a member of the HQ Global Media Team for 6 months. It's your first role in an NGO. Part of your role is to travel to support the country team's media work. You have previously only traveled to Nepal. You are uncomfortable traveling in a conflict area. However, you have concern in mentioning this. I will now ask the reporter of Group South Sudan to introduce him or herself and give us feedback of the work done within the group. Who is the reporter, Group South Sudan?
I don't think we decided on a rapporteur, but I can speak very briefly.
Thanks, Adelisha.
Yeah, my name is Adelisha, and I used to work for GISF, and at the moment I'm with Humanitarian Outcomes. And yeah, for this first profile, the risks that were identified were particularly inexperience, especially working in a conflict area, and the risks that, you know, you might make poor decisions, or you might not know what to do or what not to do. You might be motivated by your desire to get the story. Potentially, there's a risk of being a foreigner. And another risk of potentially being the only foreigner or one of the foreigners in a group of national staff members, and there's some time of pressure that national staff members feel to take on and agree with the opinions of a foreigner.
Fine, thanks, Adelicia. And which mitigation measure against this kind of risk to mitigate them?
Well, one of them was perhaps to brief the staff member on the local situation, especially local laws, somehow make sure that the foreign staff doesn't have undue power or influence over the decision making, more thorough preparation by more experienced staff members.
Fantastic, thank you. And the last point, a benefit to have this staff member in the team. Could you also cover this aspect?
So here we've got expertise in media, increased projection in the media. I think someone here put fundraising. Originally there was a comment around boiled frog syndrome, which is having someone from the outside come in can sometimes help with understanding the risk that someone who's there in that context might not see.
Thanks, Adelicia. Really well done. You can also see in the chart some additional risk and mitigation measure put there by Catherine. Let's move to the profile number 2 of South Sudan. I'm going to read it out again. So you are a national staff member from Dinka ethnic group. The location for the visit is in an area controlled by the newer ethnic group. Your name on the ID documents indicate your ethnicity. The international staff who organized the team is not necessarily aware of recent ethnic conflict between the two groups. Again, Adelicia, if you want to share some feedback about risk mitigation measure and benefit that you discussed. Thanks.
The biggest risk that everyone identified were risks associated with the ethnicity of the staff member and the conflict that might affect. So harassment, potentially arrest, detention, all of these things due to their ethnicity.
Yeah. And on mitigation measure, yes.
Yeah, in terms of mitigation measures, to discuss with local leaders before traveling, to potentially decrease or limit the visibility of the ID card, though that was said might be difficult because ethnicity isn't something that you can always hide. Maybe assess high-risk areas and avoid traveling to those locations. And briefing the international staff member and considering changing the plan, potentially not asking that staff member to travel.
Very valid point. Thanks. And about a benefit to have the person in the team?
The technical expertise that they might be providing, the fact that they have local knowledge, and also that they would probably be very sensitive and aware of the political and ethnic considerations needed.
Fantastic. Thank you, Adelicia. And again, you can also read in the chat box additional inputs. So let's move now to the scenario number 2. So we hand over to Julie to read it out. Thank you.
Thank you, Simona. So case study 2, Iraq. So Iraq group, please get ready to feedback. This is a group of international staff new to the organization, currently at the European headquarters for pre-deployment induction and training. They are to be deployed to Iraq in various roles on one-year contracts. They may be based in the capital, the regional capital, or in remote field locations. The organization has been present in Iraq since 2000, providing a multi-sectorial response around child protection, prevention and response to gender-based violence, psychosocial support and health, adapting the needs in a dynamic context in camp settings and host communities across central northern Iraq. Back to you, Simona. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. As before, I'm going to read the profile number 2. So you are HIV positive. You have not told your organization nor your colleagues. You will need access to very specific prescription drugs for the duration of your deployment. I will now ask the rapporteur of Iraq group to introduce him or herself and give us feedback about the discussion in the team. Who is the rapporteur?
We didn't have anyone sort of trampling us down to get to the rapporteur job, Simona, but maybe I could ask Charlotte, you spoke a little bit, and Abraham, so would one of you like to do it or not so much? Putting you on the spot. Go on, it'll be fun.
I'm happy to do it about this one.
Thanks. Thanks, Charlotte. Please introduce yourself.
So yeah, so my name's Charlotte Aston. I work as a security officer for Tier Fund based in the UK.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, and everyone on this call. So based on this one, we said the risk profile could be the lack of appropriate medicine, could be threats from the authorities and potentially colleagues as well, because they weren't informed about this, and or discrimination due to the person having HIV and not culturally might not be acceptable, or the understanding of it might not be clear.
Thanks. And any mitigation measure discussed?
So we said training for staff and awareness, make sure staff are aware of local legislations and relative health provider in the country to help support them, and yeah, to find the medication to be available to them.
Fine, thanks. Any benefit of having this person in the team?
Yeah, inclusion equity, if they've lived with it for a while as well, to help people understand HIV more. And,
thanks. Thanks, Charlotte. Well done. Catherine has also put additional comments in the chat. And please remember that also, unfortunately, in many countries around the world, still there are restrictions on entry visa for HIV positive. So moving now to the next profile, profile 3, Iraq. So I'm going to read it out. You are a gay man, not open about this at work. You have not disclosed this with anyone except the country representative. Again, a rapporteur for Iraq, who was now Catherine.
I think, Charlotte, can you carry on? Would that be okay? Quiet.
Yeah, I'm happy to. Sorry, I was just...
Thanks a lot, Charlotte. Cheers.
So over to you.
Yeah, so again, I guess similar to the other one as well, might not be as culturally acceptable or social awareness of it. It could be, I don't know personally, but it could be illegal in the country as well. And there could be the risk of arrest, detention, harassment, blackmail, assault or killing as well.
Yeah.
Then some mitigation measures were pre-departure awareness of the local laws, perception, a risk assessment done as well.
Good.
We didn't get to a reason, but I think that would be similar to the previous one, inclusion equity. The other thing we discussed as well is awareness in this organisation of general things. It struck me that not many people wanted to speak out about things that make them diverse or different, and actually maybe there needs to be a whole organisational change on that as well, just to make people more, not to force anyone to speak out,
absolutely,
but just to encourage people that it's okay.
Thanks, Charlotte. Very great feedback. Please, here also in the chat, we put additional information, including the link to the ILGA organization, which can give an updated map about the situation in country for legal and cultural issue for LGBT+ staff. So moving on to the next scenario, we have Yemen now. I'm going to read out the case study. You are a mixed group of international staff based in Sana'a. There is a recent escalation in fighting and therefore a need to evacuate. You have spent 2 nights in hibernation in organization guest houses. The only option for evacuation is by air in a UN organized airlift. The airport is on the edge of the city with possible official and unofficial checkpoint on the way. The government does not want the international community to leave. Militia may target nationalities that are felt to be involved in the conflict. Kidnap of international staff is an issue. Some of you are together, other in other accommodations, so you have to plan this evacuation remotely. Over to Julie to discuss the profile. Thanks.
Thank you, Simona. Okay, so Yemen group, be ready, please. So the first profile there is of a veteran NGO staff member, has worked in conflict areas for many years, has had previous treatment for post-traumatic distress disorder and has made progress. However, this person is now concerned that the current situation may trigger a relapse or an episode. HQ Human Resources are aware of this, but you have not discussed it in country. So do we have a rapporteur please, for Yemen?
I think that might be me. I did point out that a volunteer is someone who's misunderstood the question, but since no one else stuck their hand up, I said I would do it. I'm Phil. I'm the security advisor with MEDAIR, based in Switzerland.
Thanks, Phil. So yes, do you have your points for this profile? Thank you.
Sure. So the clear thing with this profile was the sort of specific vulnerability or issue that we talked about is wanting to avoid re-triggering the PTSD. When you look at that context, there are any number of threats or risks that could happen in that situation that could. So we talk more generally about trying to avoid re-triggering the PTSD. One thing we looked at was checkpoints. So a mitigation measure was potentially shielding this person from direct interaction with soldiers or militia at checkpoints, making sure that they weren't the point person despite their experience. The reason that you would maybe have this person or would want this person on the team is his experience, and we talked about both his experience in high-risk context and potentially also his experience of self-care and managing PTSD, which in of itself might be of benefit to the rest of the team. I think that was everything we talked about, but others please chip in if I've missed anything.
Yes, thank you, Phil. If anyone has anything else to put in the chat, please do add, and you will see again that Catherine is putting some of our suggestions, if you like, into the chat. I can't actually, can somebody read those to me? Are there any others that we might read out?
I think Phil's last point there, which is about how staff members themselves are experts in their own vulnerabilities, they're experts in their own health, mental health, physical health, and that actually can be a massive plus in a team, especially where you're working with locally recruited personnel as well, who would like to see someone doing their job, going through the same struggles and challenges that they do as well. So this whole idea of of being passively, being a passive staff member is just not the case, and it's a great resource for everybody. So thanks very much for that, Phil. Good to see you.
Thank you. Thanks, Catherine. Thanks, Phil. Okay, so should we go on next, please, to the next profile, profile 2. So you are deaf. The organisation has support mechanisms in place for you. You are concerned that in this crisis period, you will not get the specific support that you need. So will we get, is Phil coming back, or do we have another person? Also on board, of course, we have Philip. So Philip, please do chime in if you wish to. Rapporteur, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, I'm happy to share, but then as again, please, others who are in the group do chip in. So again, we did sort of talk about a number of risks or threats that that might apply. So the one we were specifically talking about is that this person, we wanted to guard against extra vulnerability if they're at a checkpoint and they cannot hear the instructions that are given by the soldiers at the checkpoint or by their colleagues, which could lead to potential violence or targeting if the soldiers at the checkpoint don't understand and feel that this person is not responding to instructions. We talked about, there's some others as well. We also talked about the fact it may be difficult for them to contribute to the discussion on the evacuation if that's being done verbally over Teams or Skype. Mitigation measure that we talked about is, I think it was also put into the chat for the other person as well, but in terms of having a buddy system or having so a buddy for this colleague, particularly when traveling through the checkpoints, as we talked about, someone who would specifically be with them to sort of help them with communication in that situation. The reason for having this person on the team, so assuming that they're very good at their job, and we also spoke about the principle of diversity and inclusion, having them on the team.
Lovely. Yeah, thank you, Gavin. Philip, did you want to add anything into that?
Sure. Maybe just one point that came up as well in the discussion from a participant was having assistive devices that will ensure that if there's an emergency situation, this person would also be notified.
Yeah. Okay. Lovely. Thank you very much to both of you. Let's go on to the next group. So we're into Pakistan. Thank you, Simone.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. So this is the case study. You are a group of mixed international and national humanitarian workers working with a large faith-based Christian INGO in Islamabad. Despite rumors that government were not renewing visas, your organization currently permitted to stay and operate. The main program activities is related to protection against GBV. The program has gained some negative attention from certain groups. The current project areas are a rural part outside Islamabad and soon to be included Peshawar, which is a conservative area with recent insecurity. Continuing expanding the program is seen as critical and time sensitive. The team is planning for 2-week funding mission in Peshawar, and you are now about to meet the team for the mission. So over to Julie for the profiles. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Simona. So the second profile, the one we wanted to focus on for Pakistan, you are a British woman on your second posting abroad. You have worked for a year for a national NGO in India, where your grandparents are originally from. You are very experienced in your field. You've traveled extensively, although that was mostly in Europe. Being a woman of Indian descent living in Pakistan has created more challenges than you had anticipated. So traveling into rural conservative areas makes you nervous, although no one in the office has mentioned any concerns about that. So do we have a rapporteur, please, for Pakistan?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, who's that? Can you
It's Nathan Parker. I'm the Global Readiness Manager for AmeriCares.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much. All right, so what did you come up with for this profile?
For profile one, and one of the things that we noticed across all the profiles really is the intersectionality of risk and the importance of focusing on that intersectionality in a deliberate way to reduce risk for that specific individual. Profile one is strongly intersectional in terms of her risk profile. She's presumably white, Norwegian, and female. Her experience may also either be a protective factor or a risk factor, depending on whether it leads to overconfidence.
Okay, Nathan, I'm just going to jump in there. We're actually on profile 2. We skipped one profile.
Oh, so we skipped one. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No worries. So could you give us your feedback for profile 2? Thank you.
Absolutely. Also multiple intersections, potential discrimination and or targeting of this individual. She's Indian by heritage, British by nationality, neither of which are particularly well liked in Pakistan. Also female, among other potential unknowns, for example, her religious background. Potential mitigation would be understanding the underlying tensions, particularly for this, as this staff member is a second or third generation, so maybe removed from her cultural background. And it might help if there was like a pre-deployment informational briefing prior to her arrival in the area, so that she can be well oriented to the context of the community.
Yeah, absolutely. And what key risk do you think she might face, or could you give us a risk that you came up with?
Just the potential discrimination or deliberate targeting of this individual by state or non-state actors.
Right. Okay, so potential harassment maybe as she moves around, do you think?
Yep.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. What about the value of her? Does she have value in this team?
Strong national NGO experience and also potentially a fresh outsider's perspective on the issues.
Yes, yes, absolutely. It's quite possible, is it not, being in a conservative area, that she would face more harassment, or it may just be possible that she doesn't face harassment. So, you know,
exactly.
But it's definitely a possibility, but it could be a plus. It could be a plus to theoretically look like the rest of the community. So it could actually be a positive and not necessarily a negative. But yeah, very good points brought up. Thank you. So let's go to profile 3. So this is a male Pakistani national. Sorry, I'm just going to read this out for those who weren't in the group. Thank you. So a male Pakistani national, been with the organization for a long time, originally from Peshawar, where they used to practice medicine, and now specializes in medical issues around gender-based violence. So thanks, Nathan.
Sure. We discussed that the staff member might be habituated to his context, having worked and lived there for so long, and may actually, similar to the others, have experience can be a plus, and it can also lead to security blind spots. You may be just more accustomed to the risk in the area.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Do we need any mitigation here, do you think?
It could be possible, and I don't know exactly what the organizational policies would be, but to do an in-country security briefing, just to kind of do a refresher, so that hopefully any of those blind spots that he may have developed would be addressed.
Yeah, it's a very good point, actually, being lulled maybe into a false sense of security. I mean, he may face hostility from the local community, for example, for promoting what they might think would be Western values or non-Muslim values. That's a possibility, isn't it? What is the benefit of having him in the team?
He potentially opens an avenue for patients and clients who would be more comfortable interacting with a male for some reason, because gender-based violence is not exclusively a female province, although it is predominantly. But it could also be homosexuals or transgender individuals or whoever may just not be comfortable talking to a female provider.
No, absolutely. And I would think also he comes with normally with a huge amount of respect from the local community, being a doctor, being an older man. So one that carries that kind of status. Excellent points. Thank you very much indeed. Again, Catherine has been putting some additional points into the chat, so thank you, Catherine. Fantastic. So I am going to pass back now, please, to Somnath. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie, and thanks to all the participants for your active contributions. Indeed, some valued points we can see in the chat from many of the participants. Now let us move to the key messages. So the key messages: all personnel have an individual personal risk profile. So even if we talk about diverse workforce and all those things, so we need to understand that it consists of one and each individual who have their own personal risk profile. In particular context, this profile can interact to expose that person to increased or even sometimes unacceptable risks. Deliberate consideration of personal profiles leads to better alignment between security risk management and programmatic needs. There are distinct benefits in establishing a person-centered approach to security practice in humanitarian and development settings. Again, going back to that, one size does not fit all. Now let us hear from the facilitators about what their organizations are doing as far as we go for person-centered approach to security risk management. Let us hear from our colleague from Save the Children. Over to you, Simona.
Thanks, Somnath. So at Save the Children, we started in the 2019 with a staff survey, after which we decided to establish an area within the Safety and Security Department specifically dedicated to inclusive safety and security risk management. I had the pleasure to lead so far this area, which is mainly focused on 4 work streams. The first one is the revision of global and local procedures and tools to make them more inclusive. The second area of focus is related to inclusive risk management, travel risk management, and some example of this is that we have reviewed all our briefing pre-departure, integrating information for LGBT staff, for people with disability, gender threats, etc. We have also produced several awareness raising material, including a guidance with travel top tips, as well as some videos, animated videos, one of which about the impact of unconscious bias into safety and security. A third area of focus is capacity building to safety and security personnel across our countries, and eventually we have improved our incident reporting system, making it more inclusive and able to disaggregate data and analyze them at least with a lens of gender and other characteristics. So this is just a brief summary. Of course, feel free to reach me out for additional information. Over back to you, Somnath, and thanks.
Thank you, Simona. Now let us hear about the best practices being followed in the ICRC. Over to you, Pega.
Thank you, Somnath. So for the past 6 months, we've been working on a project to adopt a more person-centered approach to security risk management at the ICRC. We started off with research. We did a landscape analysis of existing good practices within the humanitarian sector. And then we conducted a global survey and some interviews with our staff to get a better understanding of what the needs really are in security. Based on these findings, then we identified a set of very practical recommendations which really applied across all levels of the institution, including many of the departments at HQ and at the country level. And I'll share 2 of our initiatives with you that came out of the recommendations. So first, we acknowledge that understanding profile-specific risks is really the first step in this approach. So we developed some new guidance on how to apply a person-centered approach when conducting risk assessments at the country and at the office level. So we're already quite inclusive when it comes to selecting participants for our risk assessments, but that alone is not enough. So this new guidance goes a step further and provides practical tips on what to include, what to discuss in a risk assessment, but also facilitation tips on how to discuss some topics that may be more sensitive in some contexts. Second, we realized that a major challenge for our staff was their lack of access to relevant information about the risks associated with their personal profile. So we added a guidance for managers to systematically share security information about all profiles with all staff and security rules and in the country briefings. And we also created a page on our internal website with profile-specific resources that our staff could access without having to disclose any personal information to the institution. For example, Simona already shared one with ILGA, so it's a website that provides information about the laws and local perceptions towards the LGBTI+ community. CBM has also published a lot of great resources for staff living with disabilities. We wanted to share all of these with you since we've compiled them, and basically all these resources are now in one place with input from everybody on the team. And it's on the GISF website, so Megan will throw that in the chat for everyone. So feel free to use this in your organizations, share them with your staff, share them with your security focal points, and yeah, great. So that's a bit of what we've done. I'll hand it back over to you, Somnath. Thank you.
Thank you, Pega. Now, as you mentioned, CBM has been doing a lot of things on this particular area. Let us hear Philip. Over to you, Philip.
Thank you, Somnath. So CBM, as part of its inclusive approach to security management, we've tried to develop specifically disability inclusive processes, standards for all staff worldwide. So that included trainings with staff where we do scenarios which include situations that would specifically affect people with specific disabilities. One important element is to always include those people with specific profiles or with disability when we develop these kind of standards or processes. And a key learning as well for us is that there is no standard solution. So a lot of information sharing goes around the organization continuously. We try to always improve. And for example, in this training scenarios we do in the in-house travel security trainings, we practice scenarios such as a blind employee staff safely passing a checkpoint, or what to do a person who is in a wheelchair user and a personal assistant, how to explore the hotel escape routes in a earthquake zone. So quite hands-on specific scenarios. And as Pega mentioned earlier on, you can find all of this information in the link that just was posted in the chat box. Thank you. Back to you, Somnath.
Thank you, Philip. Now, let us go to our colleague, Julie. She'll be talking about best practices in UNHCR. Over to you, Julie.
Thank you, Somnath. Well, I will start by saying that this is relatively new terminology for the UNSMS, the UN Security Management System. So that would include UNHCR, of course. And it's an approach that we are still very much developing, learning about, incorporating. However, the practice and the concept are not, as you may imagine, entirely new to us. And in several aspects, this does really mean that we already consider personal risk profiles within a particular context. We assess risk to individuals and groups of individuals, of course, based on their specific profiles, and we would be implementing measures adapted to that. So this could be on an ad hoc basis. So within UNHCR and indeed within the UNSMS, this approach has currently mostly been related to the inclusion of gender considerations. We have the UN-wide policy on gender inclusion in security management that came into force in 2016. And as part of this, UNHCR has made integrating gender aspects a top priority. We provide training on gender inclusion to national and international security officers. And we've adapted some of our interview guidance, for example, and job descriptions to assure that knowledge is mainstreamed and expected, in fact. So the other area that's received attention within the UN security management system is disability. So including disability considerations into security risk management processes. We have some guidelines on that were issued in September 2020. So we fully recognise that an individual may be at greater risk because of their personal profile and its intersectionality. So looking forward, UNHCR has fully identified the need to widen our approach beyond these two aspects to include more person-centred elements. So in summary, I guess I could say we've started, but we're fully aware that we're not quite there yet. But it has been fantastic to be part of this group as we've put together this session to see what other organisations are doing. So thank you very much. Back to you, Son.
Thank you, Julie. Now let us move to Catherine.
Thank you very much, Somnath. So in the UN Department for Safety and Security, we've engaged ourselves in two new learning pathways, which include a very strong stand on UN values. So that is professionalism, integrity, and respect for diversity, and all of which underpin the person-centered approach. So today, we're honored to share with you pardon me, the global debut of a short video that reflects both the unprecedented global challenges that we face, as well as the opportunities that our differences bring.
We are of the world, for the world. And our diversity empowers us to make the world a better place for all.
Well, I hope you enjoyed watching that as much as we enjoyed creating it. And over to you, Somnath.
Thank you. Now, let us move forward and find out the way forward. This session aimed at raising the awareness on the concept of person-centered approach. For the first time, the security sector has participated in this HNPW in this big way. Way forward will be largely dictated by you all, the participants, what you take from here and how you take it on further along with your inside in your organization and across the organizations. In conjunction with other security sessions presented this year, the aim is to inspire and build upon the momentum created and work towards overreaching objectives of broader engagement and increased understanding of security risk management. Hope is that this will be achieved by greater collaboration and coordination between the security and humanitarian sectors through establishment of communities of practice. So participants, shall we move to the next slide? Our sincere thanks and gratitude to each one of you who spared your valuable times and participating in this pandemic era from all across the world. We had very thoughtful and very intense discussions on person-centered approach, and we are looking forward to again interacting with you on this topic maybe sometime in the near future. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.